Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Floyd Richmond, and today we're going to do a quick review for our first test in music appreciation. First though, where do medieval soldiers hang out when they're off duty? At the nightclub. What did the Renaissance robbers take from the music store? The lute. Why didn't the Baroque composer George Frederick Handel go shopping? Because he was Baroque. I saw a new music shop in town that only services instruments made between 1600 and 1750. It's called If It Ain't Baroque, Don't Fix It. Someone stole all my Bach records. They just Baroque in and took them. Why couldn't the classical string quartet find their composer? He was Haydn. Did you hear about the early romantic music coming from a grave in Vienna? It sounded like it was being played backwards. It was just Beethoven decomposing. Seriously though. In your listening assignment, I had asked you to listen to Benjamin Britten's Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra. In that listening assignment, you should have learned to distinguish between the woodwinds, brass, strings, percussion, and full orchestra. Additionally, you should have learned to distinguish the sound of the flute, the oboe, clarinet, bassoon, trumpet, horn, trombone, tuba, violin, cello, double bass, piano, organ, harpsichord, synthesizer, and various percussion instruments such as the snare drum, the bass drum, cymbals, timpani. So you will have some questions where you have to identify the difference between each of those sounds. One of the things that may not have been covered is the notes of the scale. So let me just go ahead and review with you. If I were to sing a major scale, it would sound something like this. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You should be able to tell the difference between the first 5 notes of the musical scale, do, re, mi, fa, so. Again, do, re, mi, fa, so. On the screen here I have 5 patterns. I'm just going to sing each one of them so that you know what they sound like. Do, re, mi, so. The next one is do, re, mi, do. The next one, do, mi, re, do. The next one, do, mi, re, so. The next one, do, so, mi, do. The next one, do, mi, so, do. So that's the level of discrimination I'm expecting you to have. Ah, ha, ha, ha. Ah, ha, ha, ha. Also, I'm going to ask you on the test to be able to distinguish between slow notes and fast notes that we call quarter notes and eighth notes. If you look at the screen now, you will see that there are patterns. They begin with quarter notes, which represent the steady beat. The next pattern also includes eighth notes, and eighth notes are twice as fast as quarter notes. You'll notice that this one has quarter, eighth, eighth, quarter, quarter. The third pattern is 4 eighths followed by 2 quarters. The next pattern is 2 eighths and a quarter, 2 eighths and a quarter. The next one is a quarter, 4 eighths and a quarter. So you should be able to identify each of those patterns just by looking at the musical notation and by listening to them. The next thing I'm going to ask you to do is to be able to listen to a piece of music and to identify its meter. So I should just go ahead and explain real quickly. Anytime you listen to a piece of music, it's either in duple meter, meaning there are 2 beats in every measure, triple meter, meaning there are 3 beats in every measure, or quadruple, meaning there are 4 beats in every measure. All right, let's just go ahead and see if we can identify the meter of a few of these songs. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. You will notice that I started conducting so that the pattern goes down, up, down, up, up. Well, it's sort of like that. It's kind of like a waltz. That one is in 3/4. All right, what about this one? Okay. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Okay, that one is in a 4 pattern. And so you will have 5 songs in which you are to identify the meter of the music. Because it is so difficult to distinguish duple and quadruple meter from one another, they sound roughly the same when you're listening to them. I will only be asking you to differentiate between triple meter and quadruple meter. All right, next I'm going to go ahead and ask you to identify the difference between major chords and minor chords. Anytime you're listening to music, you will find that it uses a combination of major, minor, and other chords as well, but mostly major and minor chords. You will have 5 examples of different chords where you have to listen to the chord and say, oh, that's major, oh, that's minor. And I'm going to ask that you would know some basic information about music as well. For example, how many letter names are used traditionally in music to name the notes? Well, the answer to that is 7, and they are A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. What musical symbol indicates a note should be raised a half step? Well, that would be the sharp sign. It looks like the number sign or the hashtag. What symbol indicates a note should be lowered a half step? That would be the flat sign. It looks like a small b. What musical symbol indicates an accidental should be canceled? That is a natural sign, and it's kind of hard for me to tell you what that looks like. It looks like a chair maybe with a missing leg on the back. I'm also going to ask you to write the letter names of the white notes on the keyboard for 1 octave. I'm also going to ask you how many notes on a full-size piano, and the answer to that is 88. The next question is going to be, what is the number of the first C on a full-size piano? Well, that would be number 1, in other words, C1. If you are learning to play the piano, you will often find that the teacher asks you to start on the middle C of the piano. So, how many C's are there on a piano? There would be 8, and the middle C is the 4th of those. So, C4 is middle C. What is the name of the solfege for each note of the major scale? No matter what key you're in, it's always do for the first note, re for the second note, mi for the third note, fa, sol, la, ti, and do for the remaining notes respectively. How many notes are in a 1 octave chromatic scale? There would be 12 notes in a 1 octave chromatic scale. There are the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, but there are also notes between the do and the re. Do, di, re, re, mi, and so on. Before I talk about key signatures, let me just go ahead and explain the connection between the following terms. So this question is, what do these terms mean? Key. A key is a note on a piano. However, we often use the word key to identify the one note that is most important in a song. And in fact, we say a song is in a given key if the song is built on a scale that starts on that key, and the melodies are constructed from the notes of that scale, and the harmonies are constructed from the chords of that scale. So what's the connection between each of the following: key, scale, melody, chords? Well, that's what makes up we call it the tonality of the song. So tonality means that we are focusing on a single tone, a single key, and We identify that one, we build all of our scales on that tone, on that key. We build our melody from those scales, and we build our harmony from chords that are built from that scale. Okay, so how many major key signatures are there? There are 15. Now this may not make any sense because there are 7 letters that name the musical alphabet: A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. With all of the notes between those notes, we have a total of 15 different key signatures that we can use. Some of the notes have multiple names. For example, a C sharp and a D flat are both different ways of identifying the note between C and D, and so we have key signatures such as C sharp and D flat. There are 15 major key signatures, and then there are 15 minor key signatures as well. So you'll also have questions about the musical periods. There are 7 musical periods. The ancient period is from prehistory until about 450 AD. The medieval period is from 450 AD until 1400. The Renaissance period is 1400 to 1600. The Baroque period is 1600 to 1750. The Classical period is 1750 to 1820. The Romantic period is 1820 to 1900. The Modernistic period is 1900. And it continues into the contemporary period of today. We have limited information about the ancient period because there was no written musical notation or recording of any songs. We do have the lyrics of a few songs in the writing of the times. We also have a few descriptions of the music in the writings of, say, Plato and Pythagoras, and we also have pictures of instruments in the art of the day. It's likely that the songs were monophonic, through composed, or using simple repetitive structures, and singable. The medieval period from 450 to 1400 featured a large emphasis on vocal music, and most music was centered within the church. During the medieval period, notation developed, and so we do have a record of a number of medieval songs. We can recreate those today. Church music was unmetered and followed the rhythm of the text. It was frequently sung by soloists or a group of performers singing in unison. Simple but increasingly complex harmonies were used toward the end of the medieval period. There was some secular instrumental music that was especially prevalent toward the end of the medieval period. Secular music was more often used for dancing and consequently had a stronger sense of beat and meter. The Renaissance period from 1400 to 1600 saw the development of more complex harmonies, and the texture of the music that was performed during this time was strongly polyphonic, meaning there would be several melodies playing at the same time. The harmonies were what we would call modal in today's vocabulary, with a focus on many different forms of the minor and major scales. Music was still largely unmetered, although some metered music did exist. The Baroque period lasted from 1600 until 1750. It began with the introduction of opera in the very early 1600s. The rhythms of the Baroque period were strongly driving, with barely room to breathe. The harmony of the Baroque period began to focus more strongly on modern major and minor keys. This created a stronger sense of harmonic motion in the music. The texture of the music was primarily polyphonic, meaning that multiple melodies performed simultaneously or in an overlapping manner. The Classical period lasted from 1750 to 1820. During this period, music transitioned from primarily polyphonic to primarily homophonic. Homophonic music has a single, simple melody accompanied by a more complex harmony. Music continued to focus on modern major and minor chords. Melodies were written with even phrases with room to breathe. The Romantic period from 1820 to 1900 saw an increased emphasis on emotional expression in music. The orchestra and dynamic expression became much bigger. The number of significant composers also grew. Harmonies became more chromatic, using many more accidentals. The length of melodic and rhythmic phrases became much less regular. and the increased development of musical ideas made compositions longer than before. The modernistic period, starting in 1900, saw a much more experimental approach toward music. Composers invented new systems of composition, intentionally attempting to move away from the harmonic practices of the past. They wrote music that was much more dissonant and for much smaller ensembles. The early 1900s and 1920s saw the rise of a large jazz tradition, a new form of American music, and the 1950s saw an increased emphasis on popular music. Where did the music teacher leave her keys? In the piano. I hurt my wrist and had to go to the doctor. I asked him, when this heals, will I be able to play the piano? The doctor said, yes, you'll be fine in a few days. I said, great, I've always wanted to be able to play the piano. That's going to take you through the information that's going to be on the first test. I'm sure you're going to do great. Thank you for going through the review. See you in class.